I'm pretty damn good at finding folks that are missing. Usually it's a simple thing, like they wander off the path or slide down the side of a small cliff and get lost trying to find their way back. Most of them don't get too far away because they know about the stay where you are thing. However, I've been on a couple of cases where they did wander off. They both highly piss me off. But I utilize them as inspiration to intensify my efforts in investigating the missing persons cases I'm assigned to. The first one involved a little fella who was picking berries with his parents and sister. He and his sibling were berry picking side by side, and they both disappeared at the same time. Their parents took their eyes off of them for mere seconds. Unfortunately, during that time, both of them seemingly strayed away. After a frantic search for their missing children, their parents couldn't find them. That's when they gave us a call. So we came out and searched the area. We spotted the son almost immediately. When we asked him where his sister was, he advised us that she was led away from him by the bear man. The boy said the bear man gave him berries and told him not to say anything because he was going to play with his sister for a little bit. The last time we saw his sister, she was riding on the shoulders of this creature and giggling as they walked off into the forest. Initially, we suspected abduction, yet we discovered no sign of another individual in that vicinity. The little guy was positive that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was taller than any man he'd ever seen and completely covered in hair, like a bear. He also said that he had a weird-looking face. For weeks on end, we combed through every inch of that area, making it one of the most prolonged operations I'd ever participated in. Despite our exhaustive efforts, not even a hint of the child could be found anywhere. Just a couple of weeks ago, me and my team went looking for a young man who was hiking deep in the woods with his dad and grandpa. His dad said that his son wanted to get a better view of the forest, so he climbed up a tree. After hours of waiting at the tree and calling his name desperately, he never came back down. They came back and reported him missing. Our team was dispatched to the area. We first searched the ground around the tree. Then one of our expert tree climbers went as far into the tree as he safely could. We searched adjoining trees, above and below. Nothing. We fanned out and searched a wide berth from the tree. Still nothing. We searched everywhere. We didn't discover any sign of his presence. I'm completely clueless as to where he might have disappeared to, considering neither his father nor his grandfather saw him climb down. Something weird as hell has been happening to me during a search, and I'm talking a lot more than it should be. Me and my canine were searching our way back in the depths of the mountains for someone. The dog will be tracing the scent along, then, as strange as it sounds, they signal that the scent went straight up a cliff. I'm not talking steep rolling hills or not even jagged rock faces. I'm talking sheer, smooth, straight up cliffs. I'm an experienced climber, and trust me, there was no way in hell anyone was going to climb up it. It's very strange. In nearly all of those cases, we either locate the individual on the opposite side of the cliff, or, getting even more odd, they are found miles from where the canine was directing us. I'm sure there's a rational explanation, but it does strike me as somewhat peculiar. One day, myself and another SAR I was partnered with received bear reports from several campers in the area. We were advised to look for a man who hadn't returned from a climbing trip. He was several hours late, and the person reporting him missing was extremely worried. He's a very good climber and has never been late from the many previous climbs he'd taken. We spotted him caught in a small fissure halfway up on a cliff. His leg was definitely broken. It was obvious, even from the ground. We ended up having to do some next-level climbing to get where he was. After several minutes of strenuous scaling, we finally reached the ledge he was on. It was not pleasant. As a matter of fact, it was downright nasty. He told us he'd been trapped there for 2 days. We eventually got him loose from the crevasse and, well, let's just say my ears were ringing for a while after we freed his leg. The infection was glaringly apparent. He needed help, right now. The ledge was too small and the shape of the rock face prevented us from having him plucked off the ledge by a helicopter. He still needed to be flown to a hospital ASAP, so we called a medevac. Surprisingly, they arrived pretty quick. As a matter of fact, we were still getting him down to the ground when they arrived. He was loaded onto the chopper and they took off. This part always gives me the chills. Later on, I checked on the status of the climber. An EMT said that the guy was absolutely freaking the fuck out. The patient continued recounting how he'd been managing well, and upon reaching the summit, he encountered a man. According to him, the man lacked any climbing gear and was clad in a parka and ski pants facing away from him. Approaching the figure, he observed a disturbing sight as the man turned to face him. There was no face, just a blank void. Panicking by the terrifying encounter, he hastily attempted to descend the mountain, resulting in his fall. He recounted hearing the man's unsettling presence throughout the night, descending the mountain accompanied by chilling, eerie wails. That story scared the shit out of me. I'm just relieved I didn't have to witness the faceless man myself. I had been on search and rescue missions for 2 years when this happened. One of the most frightening experiences I've encountered happened during a search for a young woman who had become separated from the group she was hiking with. Canine had picked up her scent. It was strong. We kept tracking her late into the night. We finally located her huddled beneath a sizable decaying log. She was without her shoes and pack, clearly exhibiting signs of shock. Since she wasn't injured, she walked with us back to base. Throughout the journey, she repeatedly glanced behind us, questioning why that tall man with dark eyes was shadowing us. We checked and there was no one there. Consequently, we dismissed it as an odd manifestation of shock. However, as we neared the base, the woman grew increasingly upset. She constantly begged me to tell him to quit making faces at her. At a certain point, she paused, spun around, and began shouting into the empty forest. She screamed for him to go away and leave her alone. She adamantly declared that she was not leaving with him and wouldn't surrender us to him. We eventually persuaded her to continue moving forward, but we began to hear strange noises coming from all directions. The sounds were similar to someone coughing, but with a deeper rhythm. It had an almost insect-like quality to it. It's hard to put into words. We were about 100 yards from base when the woman turned to me with her eyes open wider than I've ever seen anyone open them. She taps my shoulder and says, "He wants you to walk faster. He's tired of looking at the scar on your neck." I was shocked. A barely noticeable scar rests at the base of my neck, typically concealed beneath my collar. I'm confused as to how this woman could have spotted it. Immediately following that, I hear that creepy coughing sound loud and clear, and I feel the air blow against my ear. I nearly shit my pants. Struggling to hide my fear, I swiftly escorted her to Ops. I'll tell you what, I was relieved when we got the hell out of that area. Now, I think this is true in all SAR units, but I'm not sure. In my experience, it's an unsaid, normal thing we encounter. You could attempt to question other SAR officers about it, but even if they're familiar with it, they're unlikely to openly discuss it. Our bosses have told us not to speak about it, and at this stage, we've grown so accustomed to it that it doesn't even register as weird anymore. On nearly every case where we're way back in the boonies, I'm talking like 25 to 35 miles, somewhere along the way, we'll see a random staircase sitting in the middle of nowhere. It's as if you took the stairs from your home, removed them in one piece, and placed them smack in the middle of the forest. The first time I saw them, I was like, "What the hell?" I asked an officer in my unit about it. He simply reassured me not to worry too much about it. He said that it was a regular occurrence. Everyone else concurred. I really wanted to go check them out, walk up them and everything, but I was advised very strongly to never go near them and absolutely don't climb them. Well, they were right. I've seen several of them, all different shapes and sizes. I've reached a point where I simply overlook them when I encounter them now, given how often it occurs. As far as the number of missing persons cases versus rescue calls are concerned, they're pretty much split down the middle. Half missing persons calls and half rescue calls. The rescue calls could be a number of different things. Hikers or climbers will fall down a cliff and are incapacitated. Some are burned by fire. It's nuts how often this occurs. usually wasted kids. Others are bitten by an animal or stung by an insect. We're a cohesive unit, and we have seasoned experts who are outstanding at tracking down folks that are lost. So when we get a case where we don't find anything at all, it becomes very aggravating. One case in particular was deeply troubling for all of us because we did find something, but it only served to raise more questions than answers. An elderly fella had been trekking solo along a trail that was used pretty regularly. His wife called us and said that he hadn't come back from his hike when he normally would have. It turned out he had a history of having seizures, and she was concerned that he might have experienced one on the trail due to not taking his meds. I hear you asking your question, and honestly, I have no clue why he thought it was fine to go out alone, or why she didn't join him. I don't dwell on those sorts of details because after a certain point, they just don't seem to matter much. When someone goes missing, it's my responsibility to locate them. We started looking for him in a standard search formation. It didn't take long before one of our seasoned veterans discovered evidence indicating that the guy had veered off the trail. We regrouped and trailed behind him, fanning out to ensure thorough coverage of the area. Out of the blue, a call blasts through the radio, directing us to rendezvous at the veteran's position. Without hesitation, we rush over, knowing that such calls usually mean the missing individual has been found and is injured, requiring our collective effort to ensure a safe rescue. We arrive at the veteran's location, only to find him standing at the base of a tree, looking straight up, hands pressed against his head in apparent distress. Curious, I ask, "What's the situation?" A teammate gestures upwards towards the branches of this tree. I could hardly believe my eyes. But there it was, a walking stick suspended from a branch, easily 30 feet above the ground. Its strap was looped around the branch, leaving it swinging in midair. It would have been impossible for the old guy to throw it that far up into the tree. We scour the area for any other indications that he might still be nearby, but find nothing. Shouting up into the tree confirms our suspicion. There's clearly no one up there. We're all left baffled, scratching our heads in confusion. It doesn't make any sense. Despite our continued search efforts, we never locate the guy. When we brought in the canines, they lost his scent way before even reaching the tree. In the end, our search was stopped due to other pressing calls we had to address, and once you get to a certain point, there's just not a lot more we can do. Every day for months, the man's wife phoned us, asking if we had an update on her husband's whereabouts. It was heart-wrenching to witness her growing despair with each call. I don't know why this specific incident affected me so deeply, but perhaps it was the sheer improbability of the situation, coupled with the unsettling questions it raised. How in the fuck did this guy's walking stick end up way up there? Was he murdered and that walking stick was put up there as some kind of macabre souvenir? Or did something in the tree snatch him off the trail along with his walking stick? We put forth our utmost effort to find him, but it felt like someone or something was mocking us. When we're discussing troubled cases from time to time, this one always comes up. Missing children cases are the most gut-wrenching. Regardless of the circumstances surrounding their disappearance, it's never an easy ordeal, and we constantly dread discovering those who have passed away. While it's not a frequent occurrence, it does happen, and it always weighs heavily on us. I can honestly say I've heard about kids being found in spots they shouldn't be or couldn't be. I'll tell you about one that I witnessed personally and think a lot about. So there's this mom with her 3 kids out for a picnic near this little lake in the park. They're aged 6, 5, and 3. She's keeping a super close eye on them, and she swears she never let them out of her sight, not even for a second. Another crucial point she made was she saw no one else in the area either. So she packs up their things and they begin to make their way back to the parking area. Now, this lake is only about 2 miles into the woods, and it's on a very obvious trail. It's nearly impossible to get lost on the way from the parking area to the lake, unless you're intentionally veering off the path for a while like a dumbass. Her kids are walking in front of her as they're heading down the path through the woods to her car. Suddenly, she hears what seems like someone approaching from behind her on the path. She turns around to look and sees no one. She blew it off and turned back around to continue on. Now, in the 4 or 5 seconds she's turned away, her 5-year-old son disappears. Assuming he just stepped off the trail for a moment to pee, she asked the other 2 kids where he went. To her horror, they both recount that a big man with a scary face emerged from the woods beside them, grabbed their brother's hand, and guided him into the trees. Oddly, the 2 siblings don't appear troubled. Actually, she mentions later on that it looks like they've been drugged. They're acting all spaced out and fuzzy. Naturally, she panics, searching frantically in the vicinity for her lost child. She's yelling his name over and over, and she claims she thought she even heard him respond at one point. With 2 other kids, she clearly can't recklessly run into the woods and leave them alone. So she dials the police, and they dispatch us right away. We quickly arrive on the scene, coordinate our grid, and initiate the search for him. Throughout this extensive search, covering miles of terrain, we fail to uncover even the slightest hint of the child. On top of that, canine units are unable to detect any scent, and we find no clothing, disturbed vegetation, or any other evidence that would suggest a child was present in the area. The mom was a person of interest for a little while. However, it's obvious that she's utterly devastated by the entire ordeal. With a ton of volunteers, we looked for this kid for several weeks. Eventually, the search winds down and we're forced to shift our focus elsewhere. But the volunteers refuse to give up. One day, we receive a call over the radio advising us that a body has been discovered and requires recovery. When they relay the location, we look at each other in disbelief, eyes wide, mouths hanging open. We were like, no, it couldn't be. We assume it must be a different person. However, we proceed to the site, approximately 10 miles from where he disappeared. And to our astonishment, we uncover the body of the missing child we've been searching for. I've been trying to put together how this child got to where he was found since he was located. And to this day, I still haven't found an answer. He was found by a volunteer in the vicinity that decided to explore unconventional locations, just in case the body had been dumped. He reached the base of a towering rocky slope. He looked up the cliff, and halfway up, he noticed something peculiar. He pulled out his binoculars and focused on it. I'll be damned. In an unexpected twist, he spotted the body of a young boy tucked into a narrow crevice in the rock. Identifying the color of the child's shirt, he instantly recognized him as the missing boy. He breathlessly calls it in, and we're sent to the location. It's crazy. Not only was this kid 10 miles from where he started, but there's just no way he could have made it up there on his own. That slope is extremely hazardous, even for us with all our climbing gear and experience. I mean, a 5-year-old? No chance he could have gotten up there by himself, I'm telling you. It took us nearly an hour to lower his body to the floor. We couldn't believe our eyes. The kid doesn't have a scratch anywhere. His shoes are missing, but his feet aren't scratched up or even dirty. Obviously, he wasn't taken up there by an animal, and as far as we could tell, he hadn't been deceased for very long, a day, maybe 2 at most. He'd been missing for over a month at that point. The entire ordeal was incredibly bizarre and ranks as one of the most unsettling calls I've ever experienced. Later on, the coroner revealed that the child had died due to exposure. He had likely frozen to death, presumably late at night 1 or 2 days before our discovery. With no suspects and no clear answers, it remains one of the strangest calls I've ever encountered. Thank you for watching and listening until the very end. You kicked total ass.